Yo Penguin, can you explain if the exostrider was delivering sentinels? Where was the sentinel for lahai-roi? The real question is, where was the sentinel?
I wonder what
inside
happens
the
if sentinel
exostrider?
inside the
Does the
exostrider
still remain
unless
the
the
I'm not
exostrider
interested in what
inside
happens
the
to
exostrider.
sentinel.
What
I don't know. However, one of the biggest revelations amongst the tears in the tragedy of the 3.1 update was the identity and purpose of the exostrider. Ameth tells us a massive lore bomb that the exostrider, the god and savior of lahai-roi, that the Royans have been worshipping for thousands of years, and the Space Trek Collective has been pouring all their effort into empowering and fixing, was actually designed with the primary purpose of delivering sentinels from another civilization to Solaris. Okay. Now, I'm of the belief that the exostrider is not beating the FedEx allegations. Yes, it is really powerful, but if it's mass-produced to deliver sentinels, which are one of a kind, then let's say it's just a very heavily armed FedEx driver. Regardless, I think the main question many people have is that if the exostrider's mission was to deliver a sentinel, and lahai-roi very clearly, according to Shorekeeper and the Space Trek Collective, does not have one, then where the hell is the sentinel that the exostrider was delivering? Now, the primary two theories I had at the beginning were that either the exostrider succeeded in its delivery before a battle with the Frenodian, meaning that the sentinel it was carrying is actually somewhere else at the moment, or the sentinel it was delivering is actually in lahai-roi at this very moment, but it, for one reason or another, is either dead, not accessible, or perhaps injured or not born. When we consider the Huanglong chamber, the vessel in which the Sentinel Jue was hibernating and delivered to Solaris through, we can see that it was rather massive, but matches up to the size of something that the exostrider could have carried. Perhaps because the exostrider had to battle with the Frenodian LF-1, this process of delivering and activating the Sentinel was not possible or was not started. And there is actually something within the lore of 3.1 that actually suggests this. With the release of the new map of the Royan Frostlands, there has been a massive drop of map lore, with several entries giving a fascinating insight into the land above lahai-roi. While I think it isn't really as massive in terms of plot and the ones we saw in lahai-roi itself, there is one particular entry that I find particularly fascinating. The map lore of the Tidelost forest. Within it, a pre-memory wipe rover is observed telling the Heliotic 6, the highest level of the Royans, the truth about the exostrider's role as an armed FedEx employee, with them actually corroborating that with their own Royan history and records. Now, although a lot of the entry is redacted, it's rather easy to guess a couple of things. Firstly, that Baldur, the exostrider in lahai-roi, did not complete their mission to deliver the Sentinel, as it was intercepted during the final transportation, which means that our first theory of the Sentinel being already delivered cannot be true. Additionally, beyond the fact that the Sentinel is directly attested to in the map lore and known to both Rover and the Royans, it was also specifically noted that before reaching the intended destination, Redacted, it had already been gravely injured in combat with Redacted. Baldur continued to battle Redacted until arriving on the land where we now live. There is some interesting things here. First, we know that Baldur was battling LF-1 or Virunga, and secondly, that the destination of Baldur was probably not lahai-roi but elsewhere, since the name of the destination itself was redacted. However, since it was gravely injured and we know went into sleep later, even with Ameth resonating and helping it, I think we can confirm that it isn't anywhere else. When we continue to read the lore entry, we can see that lahai-roi's unknown sentinel drew attention particularly from researchers in Huanglong. Now, this is particularly interesting because Huanglong is a country with 7 sentinels, which were all split from one whole. This implies to me that lahai-roi Sentinel, besides being inactive, may possibly be split or damaged into different parts, which is why it doesn't have a presence and why the Huanglong Researchers were particularly interested in it. If we continue the passage, it very interestingly tells us that the Research Institute began studies into the unknown Sentinel's regeneration. However, there is some sort of ancient civilization system that is beyond the understanding of humanity, and the plan was abandoned in favor of reawakening the exostrider instead. This of course means that lahai-roi Sentinel is either damaged, in pieces, or unawakened in some form, just like our second hypothesis, if it is capable of being regenerated. One more interesting thing to observe is that the redacted bars on the lore entry are of different lengths, which suggests that they give you an indication of how many letters are on each blacked out word. Considering that the unknown Sentinel's name is rather short, I think it may actually be Sol, a godlike entity in the Royan history that is first attested to in the Giant's Gaze map lore. To preface, Sol and the exostrider Balder are 2 different entities. Sol is the Royan's ultimate god in a sense, while Balder is the representative of Sol, sent by it after the etheric sea trapped it in the sky. Sol has been described as an entity that guided humanity's dialogue with the cosmos, which suggests a divine nature, possibly connected with the ancient civilization. This makes further sense, as in the Tidelost forest lore that we just went through, Rover's revelations about the exostrider and Sentinel actually matched with Royan history, which furthers the idea that Sol may be linked to, if not is, the Sentinel in both the Royan and Rover's perspective. Additionally, one very important thing to mention is the Rebirth Uplands map lore that we already got all the way back in 3.0. Within it, it shows a research team headed underneath the Sundamir lakebed, Sundamir being the name of the exostrider's sword, by the way, and they found an unknown structure with something being suspended inverted within it and pointing towards the Beata Woods. Originally, back in 3.0, I hypothesized that this had to do with the exostrider, perhaps being where Ameth's Mecha Scout came from, but after 3.1, I'm growing increasingly confident that this isn't actually anything to do with the exostrider at all, but actually the Sentinel. Further down the entry, we learn that the material of this structure matches the exostrider, which makes perfect sense because we now know that the exostrider and Sentinels are made by the same civilization, with the same materials. This seems to be very similar to a Sentinel hibernation pod, which we know exists because Jue came down in one and you can actually visit it in-game, being the Mianlong chamber. To further this, the reactor drive's energy literally sustains it, which infers to me that the Sentinel that the exostrider was delivering is actually still here under the lake, and probably still alive, maybe hibernating under the exostrider's power. Naturally, this also has, as you can guess, tie-ins to Norse mythology, which the Royans draw heavily from. Specifically, if the Sentinel of lahai-roi is Sol, and Balder, the exostrider, is its representative, then what we can ascertain is that Sol may be tied into Odin, the father of Balder and the chief of gods in the Norse mythos. The idea that Sol guides humanity's dialogue with the cosmos further seems to link how Odin is seen partially as a god of wisdom, where in the Voluspa it was noted that he sacrificed his eye to drink from Mimir's well, which let him see the sorrows of mankind, as well as the past, present, and future. In addition to this, Odin also hung from the well tree, Yggdrasil, staring into the waters of the Well of Erd for 9 nights in order to be able to decipher and read runes. Both of these mythological parallels are interesting because not only do they link with how the Sentinel and perhaps Sol provided the Royans with knowledge and guided their dialogue with the cosmos, but also because they involve lakes. And where exactly are we now guessing with a high certainty that the Sentinel is slumbering in right now? The bottom of the Sundermere lakebed. We may see some more Norse mythology tie-ins later on, and importantly, looking into it may give us some foresight in solving the mystery of what exactly happened to lahai-roi's Sentinel. One last thing I'll discuss in regards to Sentinel is a theory that I've had for a while about lahai-roi. A question I've always had for the history of the place is how exactly the Ice Age event happened. Within 3.1, we've gotten two key facts in regards to this. Firstly, that the Frostlands used to be comprised of plains, forests, and even dinosaur-like animals like mammoths and raptors. Secondly, that the Frenodian LF1 is focused on ontology, on existence and the void, and most likely has nothing to do with the cold weather or ice age at all. Now, with this, you may say that the cold weather is to do with the shifting of the magnetic poles to lahai-roi. I mean, after all, on Earth, our magnetic poles are in Arctic regions, right? Well, not actually. There is no real correlation between a magnetic pole and a planet's climate, because cold weather is caused by an area not getting a lot of exposure to the sun. And before you ask, no. The position of a planet's magnetic pole does not affect its orbit, so the sun could not have changed, for example, its positioning to basically not shine on lahai-roi. So that's really just told me that, yes, while it completely makes sense that shifting Earth's magnetic poles could drastically affect satellites, it can't affect a region's entire climate. And combined with the fact that we haven't gotten Rover's new element yet, which, from experience, they usually get from divine sources, whether that's Havoc from Dreamless or Arrow from Cardathea's Sacrifice, who is connected to both Imperator and Leviathan, I'm beginning to think that the hidden Sentinel of lahai-roi may be both the cause of the Roian Ice Age, as well as a source of Rover's new elements, which, from what we've discussed in this video, is probably going to be Glacio. And that is considering as well that Ameth and the Exostrider are already based on light and fire, so if they base it on fusion again, I think they'll be overdoing that element for the region. Is it that lahai-roi's Sentinel created an ice age as a protective measure before it was destroyed or silenced? Is it something that actually prevents void matter from spreading? Or is it that the ice age in lahai-roi was caused actually by the Sentinel not waking up and activating? Even though 3.1 has revealed so many details to us, there is still so much that we don't know. But what do you think? If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate your support, whether you subscribe or even donate or become a channel member. Let me know what you think in the comments, and besides that, I hope you have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you next video.